Hibernian Football Club is a Scottish professional football club based in Leith in the north of Edinburgh. It is one of two Scottish Championship clubs in the city, the other being their Edinburgh derby rivals Hearts. Hibernian was founded in 1875 by Irish immigrants, but support for the club is now based on geography rather than ethnicity or religion. The Irish heritage of Hibernian is still reflected, however, in its name, colours and badge. The name of the club is usually shortened to Hibs. The team are also called the Hibees and the Cabbage, a shortening of the rhyming slang for Hibs of Cabbage and Ribs, by fans of the club, who are themselves also known as Hibbies. Home matches are played at the Easter Road Stadium, in use since 1893, when the club joined the Scottish Football League. Hibernian have played in the second tier of the Scottish Football League system since being relegated in 2014. Hibernian have won the Scottish League Championship 4 times, most recently in 1952. 3 of those 4 championships were won between 1948 and 1952, when the club had the services of the famous Five, a notable forward line. The club have won the Scottish Cup twice, in 1887 and 1902. But have lost 10 Scottish Cup finals since, most recently in 2013. The last major trophy won by the club was the 2007 Scottish League Cup, when Kilmarnock were beaten 5-1 in the final. It was the third time Hibs had won the League Cup, also winning in 1972 and 1991. History. Foundation and early history. The club were founded in 1875 by Irishmen from the Cowgate area of Edinburgh. The name is derived from Hibernia, the Roman name for Ireland. James Connolly, the famous Irish Republican leader, was a Hibs fan, while the club were closely identified with the Irish Home Rule movement during the 1880s. There was some sectarian resistance initially to an Irish club participating in Scottish football, but Hibs established themselves as a force in Scottish football in the 1880s. Hibs were the first club from the east coast of Scotland to win a major trophy, the 1887 Scottish Cup. They went on to defeat Preston North End, who had won the 1887 FA Cup, in a friendly match described as the Association Football Championship of the World Decider. Mismanagement over the next few years led to the club becoming homeless and it ceased operating during 1891. A reformed club was established and they acquired a lease on a site in late 1892 that was to become known as Easter Road. Hibernian played its first match at Easter Road on February 4, 1893. Despite this interruption, the club today views the period since 1875 as one continued history and therefore counts the honours won between 1875 and 1891, including the 1887 Scottish Cup. The club were admitted to the Scottish Football League in 1893, although they had to win the second division twice before being elected into the first division in 1895. A significant change at the time of this reconstitution was that players were no longer required to be members of the Catholic Young Men's Society. Hibs are not seen today as being an Irish or Roman Catholic institution, as it was in the early years of its history. For instance, the Irish harp was only reintroduced to the club badge when it was last redesigned in 2000. This design reflects the 3 pillars of the club's identity: Ireland, Edinburgh and Leith. Geography rather than religion is now seen as the primary reason for supporting Hibs, who draw most of their support from the north and east of Edinburgh. Hibs had some success after being reformed, winning the 1902 Scottish Cup and their first league championship a year later. After this, however, the club endured a long barren spell. The club lost its placing in the league, and were relegated for the first time in 1931, although they were promoted back to the top division 2 years later. The notorious Scottish Cup drought began as they reached 3 cup finals, 2 in consecutive years, but lost each of them. The famous Five. Hibs' most successful era by far, was in the decade following the end of the Second World War, when it was among the foremost clubs in Britain. The forward line of Gordon Smith, Bobby Johnston, Larry Riley, Eddie Turnbull and Willie Ormond, collectively known as the famous Five, is regarded as the finest ever seen in Scottish football. The quality of the famous Five is shown by the fact that all 5 players scored more than 100 goals for the club, with the North Stand at Easter Road now named in their honour. Of the 5, only Ormond cost Hibs a transfer fee, a £1,200 from Stenozimu. Riley, Johnston, Smith and Turnbull were all signed from youth or junior leagues. The first time Hibs used all 5 in the same team was on April 21, 1949, in a friendly match against Nithsdale Wanderers. The forward line remained in place until 1955, when Johnston was sold to Manchester City. The great forward line, together with players like Bobby Coombe and Tommy Younger, largely contributed to the winning of league championships in 1948, 1951 and 1952. The team were perhaps unfortunate not to win more trophies, as they finished second to Rangers in 1953 on goal average, and second to Rangers by a point in 1950. Despite only finishing 5th in the Scottish League in 1955, Hibs were invited to participate in the first season of the European Cup, which was not strictly based on league positions at the time. 18 clubs who were thought would generate interest across Europe and who also had the floodlights necessary to play games at night, were invited to participate. Floodlights had been used at Easter Road for the first time in a friendly match against Hearts on October 18, 1954. Hibs became the first British club in Europe because the Football League secretary Alan Hardacre persuaded Chelsea, the English champions, not to enter. Hibs played their first tie against Rot-Weiss Essen, winning 4-0 in the Georg Melchior Stadion and drawing 1-1 at Easter Road. They defeated Jurgen Rdensif to reach the semi-final, but in that tie they were defeated 3-0 on aggregate by Stade Reims, who had the famous France international player Raymond Kopa in their side. Reims lost 4-3 to Real Madrid in the final. Turnbull's Tornadoes, Hibs frequently participated in the Fairs Cup during the 1960s, famously winning ties against Barcelona and Napoli. However, the club achieved little domestically until former player Eddie Turnbull was persuaded to return to Easter Road as manager in 1971. The team, popularly known as Turnbull's Tornadoes, finished second in the league in 1974 and 1975, and won the League Cup in 1972. The club also won the Dribble Cup in 1972 and 1973, and recorded a 7-0 win over Edinburgh derby rivals Hearts, at Tynexel on January 1, 1973. Performances went into decline after the mid-1970s, as Hibs were replaced by the new firm of Aberdeen and Dundee United as the main challengers to the old firm. Turnbull resigned as manager and Hibs were relegated, for the second time in their history, in 1980. They were immediately promoted back to the Scottish Premier Division in 1981, but the club struggled during the 1980s, failing to qualify for European competition until 1989. 1990s, attempted takeover by Hearts. After mismanagement during the late 1980s, Hibs were on the brink of financial ruin in 1990. Wallace Mercer, the chairman of Hearts, proposed a merger of the two clubs, but the Hibs fans believed that the proposal was more like a hostile takeover. They formed the Hands Off Hibs group to campaign for the continued existence of the club. This succeeded when a prominent local businessman, Quick Fit owner Sir Tom Farmer, acquired a controlling interest in Hibs. The fans were able to persuade Farmer to take control despite the fact that he had no great interest in football. Farmer was persuaded in part by the fact that a relative of his had been involved in the rescue of Hibs from financial ruin in the early 1890s. After the attempted takeover by Mercer, Hibs had a few good years in the early 1990s, winning the 1991 Scottish League Cup final and finishing in the top 5 in the league in 1993, 1994 and 1995. Soon after Alex McLeish was appointed as manager in 1998, Hibs were relegated to the First Division, but immediately won promotion back to the SPL in 1999. Recent history: Hibs enjoyed a good season in 2000-01, as they challenged the old firm until Christmas, eventually finishing third in the league. Hibs also reached a 2001 Scottish Cup final, but lost 3-0 to Celtic. Manager Alex McLeish departed for Rangers in December 2001. Team captain Frank Sousa Copyrighty was appointed as the new manager, despite the fact that he had no previous coaching experience. a disastrous run of form followed, which was dragging Hibs into a relegation battle by the time he was sacked in February 2002. Salza copyright he had been manager for just 69 days. Kilmarnock manager Bobby Williamson was then hired, but he proved to be unpopular with Hibs supporters. However, a string of exciting young players emerged, including Gary O'Euro unregistered trademark Connor, Derek Reardon, Kevin Thompson and Scott Brown. These players featured heavily as Hibs eliminated both halves of the old firm to reach the 2004 Scottish League Cup final, only to lose 2-0 to Livingston. Williamson departed near the end of that season to manage Plymouth Argyle and was replaced by Tony Mowbray. Mowbray promised fast-flowing, passing football, with which Hibs finished third in his first season as manager, while Mowbray won the SFWA Manager of the Year award. Mowbray left Hibs in October 2006 to manage West Bromwich Albion, and was replaced by former player John Collins. The team won the 2007 Scottish League Cup final under his management, but the club sold Kevin Thompson, Scott Brown and Stephen Whittaker for fees totalling more than £8 million. Collins resigned later that year, frustrated by the lack of funds made available to sign new players. Former Hibs player Mike hɨɓ̀rniən was hired to replace Collins, but he left after the end of his first full season. Another former Hibernian player, John Hughes, was soon appointed in place of hɨɓ̀rniən. Hughes, who made high-profile signings such as Anthony Stokes and Liam Miller, led Hibs to a good start to the 2009 Euro 10 season. Unacceptable performances in the early part of 2010 included a Scottish Cup defeat by Ross County, a 6-6 draw with Motherwell, in which Hibs had led 6-2 midway through the second half, broke the record for most goals scored in a SPL match. A win on the final day meant that Hibs finished fourth and qualified for the 2010 Euro 11 UEFA Europa League. A poor start to the following season, including first-round exits in Europe and the League Cup, led to Hughes leaving the club by mutual consent. Hughes was replaced by Colin Calderwood, who was himself sacked on November 6, 2011. Pat Fenlon was appointed to replace Calderwood. The club avoided relegation in 2011 Euro 12 and reached a 2012 Scottish Cup final, but this was lost 5-1 to Hearts. Fenlon largely rebuilt the team after this defeat. This resulted in an improved league position in 2012 Euro 13 and the team reaching the 2013 Scottish Cup final, but this was lost 3-0 to league champions Celtic. Losing the cup final to the league champions meant that Hibs qualified for the 2013 Euro 14 UEFA Europa League, but Hibs suffered a Scottish record defeat in European competition, losing 7-0 at home and 9-0 on aggregate against Malmö. Fenlon resigned on November 1 and was replaced by Terry Butcher. A run of 13 games without a win to finish the 2013 Euro 14 Scottish Premiership season meant that Hibs fell into a relegation play-off, which was lost after a penalty shootout against Hamilton Academical. Butcher was sacked in June and was replaced by Alan Stubbs. Colours and badge. The predominant club colours are green and white, which have been used since the formation of the club in 1875. The strip typically has a green body, white sleeves and a white collar. The shorts are normally white, although green has been used in recent seasons. The socks are green, usually with some white detail. Hibs have used yellow, purple, black, white and a dark green in recent seasons for their alternate kits. In 1977, Hibs became the first club in Scotland to bear sponsorship on their shirts. This arrangement prompted television companies to threaten a boycott of Hibs games if they used the sponsored kit, which resulted in the club using an alternate kit for the first time. Hibs wore green and white hooped shirts during the 1870s, which was the inspiration for the style later adopted by Celtic. Hibs then wore all green shirts from 1879 until 1938, when white sleeves were added to the shirts. This was similar in style to Arsenal, who had added white sleeves to their red shirts earlier in the 1930s. The colour of the shorts was changed to a green which matched the shirts in 2004, to celebrate the 40th anniversary of a friendly win in October 1964 against Real Madrid. Hibs had worn green shorts in that match to avoid a colour clash with the all-white colours of Real Madrid. Hibs have worn green shorts in 3 seasons since the 2004 Euro 05 season. For the 2012 Euro 13 season, Hibs changed the primary colour of the shirts to a darker bottle green, instead of the normal emerald green. A darker green had been used until the 1930s. For the 2014-15 season, Hibs removed the traditional white sleeves from their home kit as they changed to a darker green shirt in commemoration of the famous 5-forward line. The badge used to identify the club has changed frequently over the years, which has reflected an ongoing debate about its identity. This debate has centred on whether its Irish heritage should be proudly displayed, or ignored for fear of being accused of sectarianism. The Irish harp was first removed in the 1950s, then reintroduced to the club badge when it was last redesigned in 2000. Scottish Football Museum director Jed O'Brien said in 2001, that the current design shows that Hibs are comfortable with all the strands of their tradition. It has Leith, Edinburgh and Ireland in it. Stadium. Hibs played on the Meadows for the first 2 years of their history, before moving to grounds in Newington and Bonnington Road, Leith, in different spells between 1877 and 1879. After the lease on Mayfield Park expired, Hibs moved to a ground known as Hibernian Park, on what is now Bothwell Street in Leith. Hibs failed to secure the ground lease and a builder started constructing houses on the site in 1890. Hibs obtained a lease on a site that is now known as Easter Road in 1892 and have played their home matches there since February 1893. Before the Taylor Report demanded that the stadium be all-seated, Easter Road had vast banks of terracing on 3 sides, which meant that it could hold crowds in excess of 60,000. The record attendance of 65,860, which is also a record for a football match played in Edinburgh, was set by an Edinburgh derby played on January 2, 1950. Such vast crowds were drawn by the success of the famous 5. The pitch was noted for its pronounced slope, but this was removed in 2000. The ground is currently all-seated and has a capacity of 20,421. Easter Road is a modern stadium, with all 4 of his stands having been built since 1995. The most recent redevelopment was the construction of a new East Stand in 2010. Scotland have played 5 internationals at Easter Road, all of them since 1998. The most recent international match played at the ground was a friendly between Scotland and Australia in August 2012. The ground has hosted 1 international not involving Scotland, a friendly played between Ghana and South Korea preceding the 2006 FIFA World Cup. Easter Road has also sometimes been used as a neutral venue for Scottish League Cup semi-final matches. Rivalry. Hibs have a traditional local rivalry in Edinburgh with Hearts. The Edinburgh Derby match between the 2 clubs is one of the oldest rivalries in world football. Graham Spiers has described it as one of the jewels of the Scottish game. The clubs first met on Christmas Day 1875, when Hearts won 1-0, in the first match ever contested by Hibs. The 2 clubs became preeminent in Edinburgh after a 5-game struggle for the Edinburgh Football Association Cup in 1878, which Hearts finally won with a 3-2 victory after 4 successive draws. The clubs have met each other in 2 Scottish Cup finals, in 1896 and 2012, both of which were won by Hearts. The 1896 match is also notable for being the only Scottish Cup final to be played outside of Glasgow. Both clubs have been champions of Scotland 4 times, although Hearts have won more cup competitions and have the better record in derbies, with 273 wins to 198 in 615 matches. Approximately half of all derbies have been played in local competitions and friendlies. Hibs recorded the biggest derby win in a competitive match when they won 7-0 at Tynexel on New Year's Day 1973. While it has been noted that religious background lies behind the rivalry, that aspect is muted, and is a pale reflection of the sectarianism in Glasgow. Although the clubs are inescapable rivals, the rivalry is mainly good-natured, and has had beneficial effects. Supporters and culture. Hibernian are one of only 2 professional football clubs in Edinburgh, which is the capital of and second largest city in Scotland. The club had the third largest average attendance in the Scottish Premier League during the 2012-13 season, with 10,489. In the period after the Second World War, Hibs attracted average attendances in excess of 20,000, peaking at 31,567 in the 1951-52 season. Since Easter Road was redeveloped into an all-seater stadium in the mid-1990s, average attendance has varied between a high of 14,488 in 2006 €07 and a low of 9,150 in 2003 €04. In the 1980s and 1990s, a minority of the club's supporters had a reputation as one of Britain's most prominent casuals groups, known as the Capital City Service. Literature. The works of author Irvine Welsh, particularly Trainspotting, contain several references to Hibernian. The team is often mentioned in casual conversation and as the team many of his characters support. Visual references to Hibs are noticeable in Danny Boyle's film adaptation of Trainspotting. Begbie wears a Hibs shirt while he plays five-a-side football, while many Hibs posters and pictures can be seen on the walls of Mark Renton's bedroom. In the final short story of the trilogy The Acid House, Coco Bryce, a boy from the Hibs firm Capital City Service, is struck by lightning while under the influence of LSD in a Pilton Park. His soul is then transferred to the body of an unborn child from one of the more affluent areas of Edinburgh. Hibernian are also frequently referred to in the Inspector Rebus series of detective novels by Ian Rankin. Rebus himself is a Raith Rovers fan in the books, but he is a Hibs fan in the 2000s television adaptation of the series. Ironically, that version of Rebus is played by a Hearts supporter, Ken Stott. D.S. Siobhan Clarke, his colleague in the later books, is a loyal supporter of Hibs. Music. The Hibs anthem Glory, Glory to the Hibbies was written and performed by Scottish comedian Hector Nicol. Former Marillion singer Fish is a Hibs fan. Easter Road is mentioned in the song Lucky, from the album Internal Exile. The Proclaimers are lifelong Hibs fans, and were heavily involved with the Hands Off Hibs campaign to save the club in 1990. The title track from their Sunshine on Leith album has become a Hibs anthem, which is traditionally played before big matches at Easter Road and after the victory in the 2007 Scottish League Cup final. In their song Cap in Hand, also from the Sunshine on Leith album, the Proclaimers sing the song Joyful Kilmarnock Blues, from the first album released by the Proclaimers, is about a Hibs victory away from home. The song includes the following lyrics: ownership and finances. Although the football club was formed in 1875, it was not incorporated until 1903. The club remained a private company until 1988, when it was publicly listed on the London Stock Exchange. This public listing, combined with poor financial performance, made Hibs vulnerable to an attempted takeover in 1990 by Hearts chairman Wallace Mercer. This attempt was averted when Mercer was unable to acquire the 75% shareholding needed to liquidate the company. The club's parent company, Forth Investments plc, entered receivership in 1991. Sir Tom Farmer acquired control of the club from the receiver for £3 million. Farmer has continued to fund developments of Easter Road and financial losses made by Hibs, although he has delegated control to other figures, such as Rod Petrie. The club is now 98% owned by its holding company, HFC Holdings Limited. This holding company is beneficially owned by Farmer and Petrie. Current squad and staff. First team squad, as of 1455, August 26, 2014, note. Flags indicate national team as defined under FIFA eligibility rules. Players may hold more than one non-FIFA nationality. Under 20 squad, as of 1648, July 12, 2014, note. Flags indicate national team as defined under FIFA eligibility rules. Players may hold more than one non-FIFA nationality. On loan, note. Flags indicate national team as defined under FIFA eligibility rules. Players may hold more than one non-FIFA nationality. Coaching staff. Board of Directors, source, noted players. Arthur Duncan holds the record for most league appearances for Hibs, with 446. All of the famous five are Euro Gordon Smith, Eddie Turnbull, Larry Riley, Bobby Johnston and Willie Ormond. Euros scored more than 100 league goals for Hibs. Hibernian players have been capped at full international level for 18 different national teams, with 59 Hibernian players appearing for Scotland. Hibernian rank 5th amongst all clubs in providing players for Scotland, behind the Old Firm, Queen's Park and Hearts. James Lundy and James McKee were the first Hibs players to play for Scotland, in an 1886 British Home Championship match against Wales. Larry Riley holds the record for most international caps earned while a Hibs player, making 38 appearances for Scotland between 1949 and 1957. In 1959, Joe Baker became the first player to play for England without having previously played for an English club. To mark the club's 135th birthday, the club created a Hall of Fame in 2010. The first group of nominees, including 13 former players, were inducted at a dinner later that year. Noted managers. From 1875 until 1903, Hibs were managed by a committee, although Dan McMichael, who also acted as treasurer, secretary and a physiotherapist, was effectively the manager when the club won the 1902 Scottish Cup and the 1903 League Championship. Willie McCartney took charge of part of the league-winning 1947 Euro 48 season, but he collapsed and died after a Scottish Cup match in January 1948. Hugh Shaw inherited that team, and went on to win 3 league championships in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Eddie Turnbull, Alex Miller and John Collins all won 1 Scottish League Cup each. Bobby Templeton, Bertie Auld and Alex McAleish all won second-tier championships. Achievements. Major honours. Scottish League, first-tier winners, 1903, 1948, 1951, 1952, runners-up, 1897, 1947, 1950, 1953, 1974, 1975. Scottish Cup winners, 1887, 1902, runners-up, 1896, 1914, 1923, 1924, 1947, 1958, 1972, 1979, 2001, 2012, 2013. Scottish League Cup winners, 1972, 1991, 2007, runners-up, 1950, 1969, 1974, 1985, 1993, 2004. Minor honours, Scottish League, second-tier winners, 1894, 1895, 1933, 1981, 1999. Dribble Cup winners, 1972, 1973. Summer Cup winners, 1942, 1964. Southern League Cup winners, 1944. UEFA ranking. As of 23:32, January 7, 2014, records. Attendance, highest single game attendance, 65,860 versus Hearts, January 2, 1950, highest average home attendance, 30,700 in the 1951 Euro 52 season, highest attendance for any match involving Hibs, 143,570 versus Rangers at Hampden Park, March 27, 1948, single game, biggest victory, 22 Euro 1 versus Blackwatch Highlanders, September 3, 1881, biggest competitive victory, 15 Euro 1 versus Peebles Rovers, February 11, 1961, biggest league victory, 11 Euro 1 versus Airdrie, October 24, 1959 and versus Hamilton, November 6, 1965, biggest defeat, 0 Euro 10 versus Rangers, December 24, 1898, caps and appearances, most capped player, Larry Riley, 38 for Scotland, most league appearances, Arthur Duncan, 446, goals, most competitive goals, Riley, 234, most league goals, Riley, 187, most competitive goals in a season, Joe Baker, 46 and 1959 Euro 60, most league goals in a season, Baker, 42 and 1959 Euro 60, transfers, record fee paid, £700,000 for Alves de la Cruz to LDU Quito in 2001, record fee received, £4,400,000 for Scott Brown from Celtic in 2007, see also. Hibernian F.C, Hibernian Training Centre, notes, Hibernian F.C was registered on April 11, 1903 with Companies House as the Hibernian Football Club Limited, company number SC005323. HFC Holdings Limited was registered on June 26, 1991 with Companies House, company number SC132607. From 1890 to 1975, the top division of the Scottish Football League system was known as Division 1, or briefly as Division A. From 1975 to 1998, the top division was the Premier Division, and from 1998 to 2013, it was known as the Premier League. Since 2013, the top tier has been known as the Premiership. From 1893 to 1975, Division 2 was the second tier of league football. With the introduction of the Premier Division in 1975, the second tier became known as the First Division. Since 2013, the second tier has been named the Championship. The Southern League Cup was a regional competition held during the Second World War. References. Sources: Crampsey, Bob. The First 100 Years. Scottish Football League. ISBN A0-9516433-0-4, Jeffrey, Jim. The Men Who Made Hibernian F.C. Since 1946. Tempest Publishing Limited. ISBN A0-7524-3091-2. Lugton, Alon. The Making of Hibernian 1. John Donald Publishers Limited. ISBN A0-85976-509-1. Mackay, John. The Hibbies. John Donald Publishers Limited. ISBN A0-85976-144-4. External links: ʻhaɪbiːz.co.uk, a Euro-Hibs statistical website, Hibernian on BBC Sport, Club News, a Euro recent results, a Euro upcoming fixtures, a Euro club statistics, Hibernian FC. On Twitter, Hibernian News from the Scotsman.